Hello, CASE competition reviewers. We're excited to be presenting our entry into the competition this year. Our team is going to introduce ourselves, share our closure plan, our sanitary site design, and give some brief cost estimates. This is our team. We're all students at the Sustainable Innovation MBA, hosted by the Grossman School of Business at the University of Vermont. As we approach this plan, we will tackle our biggest challenges surrounding safety and ecosystem health by focusing on innovative solutions to the complex problems presented in the Bacote case. Now I'm going to hand it off to Josh to talk about our closure plan.
Thank you, Seal. So topographical surveys first conducted in 2002 split the Bacote dump site into 3 primary zones based on soil conditions, elevation, debris, and several other factors. Although the surface structure of the site has changed, we concluded that these 3 zones were a good basis for our closure plan. So here you can see satellite imagery of the Bacote dump site with each of the 3 zones outlined in yellow. There are 5 key components included in our closure plan for Zone 1. The first is the construction of a small information pavilion located in the southeast corner of the existing site. The construction of this pavilion would lead the project for the closure plan, and the idea here would be to provide a place for the community to check for updates and gather information regarding changes being made to the dump site. Eventually, this could be a location for general community information. The pavilion would be located at the start of a reconstructed gravel path connecting the north and south side of the dump site. The former roadway is frequently utilized as a shortcut, and we feel that the path has become an essential feature of the site and simply recommend minimal cleaning and development to make it a safe and enjoyable path to travel. Our team is suggesting the eventual installation of solar panels in the northwestern corner of Zone 1. 2 to 3 acres of solar panels, which is less than 5% of the total area of the site, would be capable of producing 1 megawatt of power. Mayor Bensouda has emphasized his desire to use the space for power generation, and our team feels that solar is less expensive, safer, and easier to maintain than the implementation of a waste-to-energy plant. Zone 1 would also be the location of the old site's gas migration collection facility and the water pollution mitigation system. This location is ideal for the infrastructure required as it is located furthest from any suggested community spaces, and it's also the lowest point of the site, which means the water naturally drains in that direction.
So moving into Zone 2, Mayor Bensouda at his recent press conference addressing the Bacote fire said, "Let us rise above the politics, let us rise above trivial issues and solve the problems of the people." We hope this proposal will contribute not just to solving the problems presented to us, but also to prioritizing the well-being of the community as the site they know transitions. For this reason, we suggest that 2 portions of Zone 2 be developed into community green spaces. Uses of these spaces could include community gardens, children's play equipment, extra walking paths, or just any other enriching additions. Our goal is to provide tangible, meaningful benefits to the local community members. That said, to prioritize the health of site users, we recommend introducing some circular rehabilitation practices. Our team proposes a green buffer zone between the community space and dump site perimeter, as well as a reintroduction of native vegetation to both green spaces. To accomplish this, we want to introduce composting to both dump site operations, as well as to the surrounding soil of the green spaces. Through this effort, we anticipate many benefits, some of which include a safer habitat for native flora and fauna and greater community affection for the space. To facilitate smooth operation of the site, we recommend building on the existing value of the entrance facilities, and our most pressing recommendation is that this location on the western edge become the only acceptable entrance point to the transfer station for waste disposal moving forward. So we recommend that several acres in Zone 2, the southwestern corner of the existing dump site, be used as a transfer station facility. We believe this could provide greater economic opportunity, incur less pollution, and provide just a generally safer approach to waste management at the site. Specifically, we continue to imagine the Bacote site to be the point of convergence for all incoming waste from the surrounding region, just not as the final destination for that waste. We anticipate that even if the dump were to be closed entirely, longtime users of the site would really struggle to adapt in real time to abrupt changes. So we account for this in part by developing this initial transfer station. This facility would serve to house operations for proper sorting via hangars, compaction, value assessment of waste, as well as preliminary processing of organic waste. So using the profits from the new site our colleagues will move on to discuss, we hope really that KMC will be able to open any additional transfer stations as they need to. Moving into Zone 3, another essential function of the transfer station site will include preliminary processing of organic waste as mentioned. So we recommend designating a portion of Zone 3 for this purpose. Given that fresh organic waste is difficult and unsanitary to sort, this plan recommends staging organic waste at transfer stations for an initial 1-month breakdown period to ease inorganic separation, yielding just more efficient transportation to the new site. Following the nonlinear process of decomposition, sorting, cleaning, and the sale of waste, what needs permanent and sanitary disposal or further processing will be transported to the final destination. Now, Zone 3 will also host the closure effort. The eastern side has the appropriate topography to accommodate the proper compaction and filling of the existing waste at the Bacote site. Our team has designed this in such a way that the cell method of landfilling can be established in daily operations with minimal preparation as well as environmental impact. Regarding cap and collection of landfill gases, we've made what we consider to be the most achievable recommendation, which is a geomembrane with an active gas collection system via horizontal piping and passive flare. There could be an opportunity for this to be adapted in the future to accommodate waste to energy. Finally, the pathway referenced here will be designed as a barrier between the transfer station's operations and pedestrian foot traffic. It will also help to reduce debris spilling over from the adjacent landfill. And now I'm going to hand it off to Josh Kenyon to talk about our suggested partner, Bifusion.
Awesome, thanks again. So I'm very excited to introduce everyone here to Bifusion. It's a company we discovered while seeking modern and innovative solutions to some of these real world problems. We feel that Bifusion would be a truly ideal partner for the closure of the Bacote dump site. First, I'll tell you about the BiBlock. It's a zero waste process that converts all kinds of plastic waste into structurally sound building materials. They are the same size as traditional concrete blocks, but can be manufactured on site and are easy to use and build with. BiBlocks are durable, do not require any glues or adhesives, won't crack or crumble, and do not require any special labor. Bifusion even offers training on the equipment during delivery and installation. So the machine looks like this. It's called the Community Blocker, and it can process up to 30 tons of plastic waste per month. These machines are built and transported in standard 40-foot shipping containers, making them both mobile and extremely durable. In our conversations with Bifusion, they made it clear that they are willing to actively work with communities on finding financing options that will work for them. They're a really great company, and they're just looking for places that these machines can actually be used the most. So our closure plan suggests that BiBlocks made from plastic waste already located on site are used in the construction of the welcome pavilion, the community space structures, and the pathway wall. Additionally, Bifusion has a guaranteed BiBlock buyback program where any blocks that are made that are not used for community development can be repurchased, which means that there's a consistent revenue coming in from the manufacture of these blocks. So adding this equipment to our closure plan utilizes waste that exists on site already, encourages plastic waste separation, and diverts tons of materials from going to the new landfill in the future, while creating economic value for the community and even jobs for community members. So with that, up next, Robbie is going to discuss our plan to incorporate the informal sector.
Thank you, Josh. As we know, one of the most important stakeholder groups to consider when closing any dump site, especially in economically developing countries and regions, is the informal sector. For many of these people, access to waste is how they earn their livelihoods. For any project to be considered just and fair to all stakeholders, the informal sector must be consulted and, better yet, included in any decision making. With that said, we've come up with 6 recommendations, and we've followed the guidelines provided by the International Solid Waste Association. Our first recommendation is that the KMC and government agencies perform an informal recycler inclusion plan to better guide their efforts for the coming years. Our second recommendation is that the KMC support and facilitate the organization of informal workers into some sort of organized body. Steps like this have been shown to be effective in cities like Pune, India. Our third recommendation is that government agencies recognize the work of the informal sector as legitimate. Steps like this have been taken in cities such as Belo Horizonte to great effect. The fourth recommendation is to promote the participation of the informal sector at the new transfer facility. We envision an organized informal sector taking part in sorting operations at the transfer facility, which Seal described earlier. Our fifth recommendation is for the KMC and other government agencies to promote the formation of value extracting micro enterprises, potentially through the use of microfinance. Our final recommendation is to promote the health and well-being of all waste workers through the provision of training and PPE. Now I'll pass it over to Chandler.
Thanks, Robbie. So in designing a new sanitary landfill, we strove to reuse waste, cut costs, and fuel the local economy as much as possible. Before we address our proposed design for a new landfill, we first would like to address the criteria for choosing a new site. Using population growth and waste generation data, we estimated that the new site would need to be roughly 20 hectares large. However, we believe that this size can be greatly reduced by using the Bacote site as a transfer station in which several types of waste will be separated from the greater waste stream. Waste removed at the transfer station will include recyclables, non-recyclable plastics, and construction and demolition waste. Recyclables can be sold on the global market for profit, while non-recyclable plastics can be used as bifusion block input material. Construction and demolition waste can be used as cover material both for closing the Bacote site and for daily cover at the new site. We have identified 3 potential locations for the new landfill site. All of the options we've identified have pros and cons, which are explained in detail in our report. The options listed here vary both in size and proximity to the Bacote site. However, given that our assumption of reduced waste entering the new site is correct, we believe that any of these sites are adequate for the region's needs and are in viable locations. Per our report, we recommend that the KMC leases plots in the new site to local businesses and entrepreneurs who are passionate about waste management. In each of the potential new site plans, we have split the site into cells which can easily be leased separately. Doing so will yield several benefits. Financially, this will decrease the costs directly to the KMC while distributing the financial risk across several businesses. Additionally, leasing land will generate more value for the community than a centralized operation. Fostering entrepreneurs in the area will spark the local economy and create differentiated jobs for non-entrepreneurial residents. Further, competition between individual operations will cause each to seek to differentiate itself from others, potentially by mastering different waste management methodologies. For instance, you may have one traditional windrow composter and another who differentiates itself by practicing vermiculture. This would increase the variety of outputs produced and thereby generate more value to the agricultural community in which these outputs are used. Once the transfer station is running effectively, we believe that the majority of waste entering the new site will be composed of compostable organic material. As such, the majority of the new site should be utilized to produce high-quality compost and organic soil additives to be used by local farms. Unfortunately, even with a fully functional transfer station, part of the new site will still need to be used as a traditional landfill. To this end, we recommend using the cell landfilling method illustrated in the bottom picture here. Early in the new site's existence, we assume the quality of compost produced will be fairly poor due to both waste mixing and also perfecting the composting process in general. As such, initial rounds of compost can be used as cap material for the Bacote site and as daily cover for the landfilling portion of the new site. I will now pass it off to Aidan Breen, who will address the technical design aspects of our sanitary landfill proposal.
Thanks, Chandler. So based on our financial and environmental analysis, we're proposing utilizing a soil-based liner system. A sand or clay liner system is financially viable and would utilize existing resources proximate or in the current site. So our proposed soil-based liner system would consist of several layers of clay and gatch and is based on a former municipal solid waste study done in Kuwait. So certain soils, such as gatch, found in semi-arid and arid regions, are able to withstand the volatile temperature fluctuations of the Gambia and would meet minimum requirements for an environmentally acceptable landfill site. So natural resources will mitigate the higher environmental and financial costs currently found at the original site, and a combination of clay and calcareous sand could provide an impermeable layer, especially when compacted. However, it should be noted that over time, the liner has the potential to crack under large volumes of weight if not properly maintained. However, this would also help ensure communal involvement in overall site upkeep. Our leachate collection system is based on the Fukuoka method, and our team decided to take a modified approach to this method for our report and apply it to our new site. This method has seen real significant success in developing Asian nations, and essentially it utilizes stone and perforated pipes installed at the bottom of the landfill, so leachate in the waste layers is drained to the leachate treatment system, and thermal convection occurs due to fermentation heat generated by the decomposition of waste inside the layers. So the design ultimately reduces moisture content, the potential for runoff, by continuously allowing piped airflow, and decreases the toxicity of leachate and groundwater runoff. So one main caveat would be that it requires the identification and proper sorting of especially hazardous or medical waste, which would damage the system. But again, this would also encourage communal involvement and employment. It also is ultimately cheaper and would reduce the risk of on-site explosion and fires. So once the leachate is collected and the pond collection reaches capacity, we would suggest pumping it back over the collected waste, and this would help it break it down. So the last step would be, before pumping the leachate back over the waste, we would propose streaming it through a constructed wetland. Essentially, a constructed wetland is built with a concrete outer shell with gravel and soil, and the gravel serves as a buffer layer surrounding the inner soil. So these have been proven to reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, and even some heavy metals, and can be planted with a variety of flora to increase filtration capabilities. This would also increase the aesthetics of the site. And we would suggest starting with 3 constructed wetlands and then adding or subtracting depending on how pure the waste becomes. So now we'll walk you through some financials.
Thanks, Aidan. So moving to our next slide, you can see our cost estimates for the Bacote closure plan and the new sanitary landfill. Based on our research and industry standard cost, we estimate the Bacote site closure will cost approximately $33 million. The cost of the new site construction, the new sanitary landfill, will cost $18.5 million. And our estimate for the total is just over $51 million. We recognize that some industry standard costs may not perfectly apply to the Gambian environment or work conditions. Moving on to our next slide for our funding opportunities. Our recommendation is that the new landfill and the Bacote closure site, if possible, be constructed and operated under a public-private partnership model to shift the financial burden and some of the risk of the earlier parts of the project to a private firm. Necessary capital to fund aspects of this project, including the eventual transfer of operations and ownership to the public sector, could be provided by the World Bank's Investment Project Financing Program or similar mechanisms from the African Development Bank. Funding may also come through mechanisms like green bonds or green loans. In activities where the KMC relies on third parties, such as waste collectors or sorters or transporters, we recommend that the KMC explore mechanisms such as results-based financing. RBF is a financial mechanism where payments for certain services is conditioned upon the achievement of certain targets. RBF has been used effectively in other cities to ensure certain standards regarding municipal solid waste are being met. Finally, over time, cost recovery activities such as the sale of recyclable materials, or compost, or the sale of bifusion blocks can also help fund the ongoing costs for operations. So that said, I'd like to start wrapping it up and say thank you for listening, and we're eagerly awaiting your questions and to discuss further. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody from the University of Vermont team and Simba Consulting. I think you guys laid out a really nice presentation today. This is, you really thought about a lot of the community needs with your presentation. So I loved the idea of the information pavilion. In our time over there and spending time with the stakeholders, I know that they were really wanting to get more information, and I think that would be very helpful. And with kind of the thoughts of it being a community space, I think future community events could also be hosted at that information pavilion. But overall, I think your entire laid out approach was very thorough and well presented. One of the questions I had was with the bifusion, and appreciate that idea as well. Just wanted to find out, if they've done work in sub-Saharan Africa to date.
Yeah, I'll take that question. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, definitely. We did get a few opportunities to speak with Bifusion, and they actually have done a few pilot projects in sort of developing regions. They weren't very specific on like the exact locations, and neither were they about the financial details. And that's because it is a very young company, and they're just launching like some of their pilot projects right now. But they were clear that they are really willing to work with communities on both the financial and operational side of the buy blocker and Bifusion production.
I'll go next. Again, just echoing what Chris just said, really thank you for an outstanding presentation. It shows a lot of depth, it shows a lot of diversity in how to solve the problems, and we really do appreciate that. I think if nothing else, there's a lot of ideas and things that can really be implementable. My question kind of echoes along the lines of Chris. Actually, looks like he just read my mind, but I'll ask two questions. One with the bifusion thing, when you look at the waste composition that you guys talked about, our studies have shown that the waste composition in sub-Saharan Africa is slightly different from the Western model, which is more similar to what you've shown. So in this particular part of the world is so close to the desert that about 48 to 50% of the waste is actually sand. With this particular decomposition method you talked about, your example shows about 15.22% of your waste is plastic. And within that plastic, you have it divided into two, basically recyclable and non-recyclable. So my question is, when you talk about the bifusion method or machine, what percentage of the input has to be actually plastic? Because you're looking at non-recyclable, so I would think it's a less grade than the recyclable. That means it has a mixture. So it's good to know what percentage of that you're looking at to make sure that it's actually financially feasible to implement and transport those machines over there. My second question is about how did you guys get to choose the different locations for the different zones for the different items? So for example, in zone 1 is where you have your gas system put in and the info booth, for example. While in zone 2, I believe is where you have the transfer station. So my question is, how did you guys get to choose and make those decisions to think those are the best options and locations? And I thank you again.
Sure, I can follow up on the bifusion. So 100% of a buy block is plastic waste. So it does require 100% plastic, but it's plastic of any different variety, so that you don't have to necessarily eliminate like recyclable plastics if there's more value in the block itself than the plastic in the recycling process, or if getting the recyclable plastic to a collection facility is expensive or difficult. Again, it can go towards a buy block, but they do require 100% plastic waste. There's no glue or adhesives or anything like that. They're used, steam is used to compress the plastic into those block shapes. So, and then Seal, do you want to talk a little about the closure plan?
Yeah, hi. So when it comes to the zone questions that you're asking, we actually took the opportunity to use some sort of, it's a kind of Google Maps Pro sort of feature. And we looked at it using the information that was provided to us for the case from multiple lenses. So looking at the water table, where that would be affected, looking at sort of what the waste makeup is now. And to be entirely transparent with you, we also used some really incredible HD drone footage that was probably some of the most recently released through, I believe, the KMC's, one of their, either it was a news outlet or one of their YouTube pages. So we actually saw sort of an overhead view of different areas of the Bakote site as they exist. And we kind of tried to weave a strategy that enabled us to look at the environmental factors, but the existing waste factors as well. And then using the supplemented information from our case, we parsed it out in a way that enabled us to kind of create a core of waste. So there's when you look at the site itself, it has like one sort of square compact section with some other external smaller congregations of waste. And so what we really were proposing is that we remove some of those smaller, less useful, less like more challenging to control bits of waste, pockets of waste, and replace them either by moving them to the cap and close or by, additionally, not necessarily explicit, in addition to moving them to the cap and close, we also propose some different types of remediation to those external pieces of waste. So yeah, I think our strategy was trying to be really practical and recognize what community members' needs were, identifying that there's a school, just across the way, and saying the path itself that is a frequent point of travel. That was a huge consideration in how we zoned things out, because it's just a necessity for the community. And while we might have a conception that the waste site is, I don't know, unsightly, I believe is the term. I mean, it's just a part of day-to-day life, and that particular avenue needs to remain useful and also increase safety. So that was one additional really strong consideration in how we separated things out. I hope that answered your question, but feel free to follow up and I can get more specific.
No, thank you. I think that answered my question. My only comment here was with the biofusion thing. We really like the idea. We would love to engage a little bit into that, but there's definitely some questions about its practicality in this part of the world. Part of the problem being the fact that waste comes in unsorted from the beginning. By the time it makes it to the dump site, it's so messed up and mixed with stuff. When you take out the recyclable portion of the plastic, and the amount of plastic that's left is so mixed that trying to get that 100% plastic again is almost impractical. But really appreciate the effort.
Yeah, of course, I do. And just to follow up on that, I think there is some leniency as far as like, it doesn't necessarily have to be clean plastic. It doesn't have to be, any certain size. Part of the process is the plastic goes through a shredder before it's compressed. It just requires like you probably, I don't think you could put like organic waste, like have heavy organic waste mixture, but that's sort of where our transfer facility, like separation of recyclables for the value of recyclable materials, and then organic material would go towards compost, and then sort of that mix of, not recyclable plastic materials and some other waste, those really could go into the biofusion blocker. And just as a couple thoughts on them is they really were like pretty excited to hear about this competition, and I really do think they're such a cool, like, up and coming company, and I definitely think they're committed to working with regions like this where the community blocker would both see a lot of use but would also be able to create a lot of value, and that's absolutely what they're trying to do. So if anything came from our presentation, I think that is a real opportunity.
I can just piggyback off of that as well. As far as the mixing of waste, in our report, we do talk a bit about our plan to try to implement kind of at point of collection separation, which is obviously a long-term process that takes a lot of education and a lot of work. But I guess our ideal as far as making that biofusion blocker as useful as humanly possible would be over several years to implement that, point of collection separation, so that we could very easily just dump that plastic waste directly into the blocker.
I'm not going to ask a question, just a few comments since we are short on time. I really liked how well thought out a lot of your ideas were in here. The plastic block was great, starting with one transfer station, potentially branching out. I thought it was really great that you observed the high number of staff, existing staff per vehicle. As an operations person, that was one of the first things I saw as a potential opportunity for future. One thing I guess I would ask is that, your future site plans are based on a lot of diversion, and if that is not possible to change the entire society and how they manage their waste, potentially a 50-acre site may not be large enough for future needs there. Those are my comments. Great job overall.
All right. Thank you, judges, and thank you again, Simba Consulting. Excellent presentation.